Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first of our public hearings of the Budget Subcommittee. So we're going to just wait for a few moments here as we make a transition, as the Mayor's office will be the first up. So whenever the transition is available, Mr. Stiles, please join us whenever you're ready. Just for process, a quorum of the committee is not required to do this because we're not taking any official action. This just gives us an opportunity to look at the Mayor's recommended budget by department as we go through the schedule of 29 of our public hearings, or not public hearings, but budget hearings. But I have been joined by Council Members Bender, Johnson, Goodman, Gordon, and Councilmember Yang, and I'm sure they'll be coming and going, additional ones coming in and additional ones leaving as schedules permit, but we appreciate their conversation and invite all questions from the full committee as presenters are going through their budget presentations. Mr. Stiles, welcome.
Councilmember Chair Quincy, council members, thank you very much for the opportunity to present Mayor Hodges' 2018 recommended budget for the mayor's office. And it is my goal to win your award for the easiest budget presentation. So you can tell me after 29 if I've succeeded or not. I think that you all know what the mayor's office does. We work with the city council to craft and implement policy and legislation for the city of Minneapolis and the city enterprise. We are organized as follows. I think that you're probably familiar with all of the staff in the mayor's office. The administration is Grace Goodrich, chief of staff is me, communications director Eric Fott, constituent relations Tutu Kamsat, deputy chief of staff Ben Hecker, policy director Peter Wagenius, and policy aides Abdi Mousse, Nicole Archbold, Lauren Robertson, Jerome Rankin, Halston Sleets, and Kelly Hoffman. This does not include the mayor herself. We have a total with those 12 of 13 FTEs, including the mayor. We have no changes in 2018. We have a 2.7% increase in current service levels.
Are there any questions for Mr. Stiles, or does he win the award at this point?
I'm done if you have any questions, but that's all that I have to let you know about the budget. There are no changes.
There are no changes to the recommended budget. Mr. Stiles, you've won the award.
Thank you. Well, you have to tell me after all 29 are done, but I'm hoping that I'm in the lead right now.
Right. So. You are definitely in the lead.
Okay. Thank you.
being the first one.
I hope you'll remember this when you're going through the long and painful ones, how easy this one was, and remember me fondly.
Yes, so. We'll remember you fondly. And you've got another 6 minutes to fill before Mr. Casey.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to do a Hamilton. Micah and Kelly and I are going to do a Hamilton routine if you've got a minute. So
we would enjoy it.
There's some fans up here. So okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Stiles. Appreciate your presentation
Chair
very
Quincy,
much.
Council members, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think we'll allow for a few moments of transition, but Mr. Carl, you're welcome to begin at any time. The city clerk will be making a budget presentation today on the clerk's office, the elections department, as well as city council. So you can go in whatever order you want of those, Mr. Carl, but whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Casey Carl. I have the privilege of serving as city clerk. And this morning, as you mentioned, I'll be presenting the mayor's 2018 budget proposals for city council and for the office of city clerk. The department is proposed to be funded in a total amount of approximately $11.3 million, which includes some enhancements through both one-time and ongoing funding increases compared to the 2017 base budget. I'd like to begin by reviewing the proposed budget for city council. That's found on pages F23 to F27 in the budget book. And following that, I will review the budget proposed for the office of city clerk found on pages F15 to F22. Here's the table of organization for the city council. As you know, the city council is composed of 13 members, each of whom represents a ward of approximately 31,000 residents based on our 2016 population estimates published by the United States Census Bureau. That means that each council member represents a ward roughly equivalent to the entire population of the city of Brooklyn Center. Each council member is supported in their official duties by a team of 2 aides. From a budgetary perspective, the city council represents just over $5 million with a full-time staffing complement of 39 full-time positions. The mayor has recommended no changes in this program between the current fiscal year and 2018, so the fiscal impact remains largely flat as proposed. This slide explains that the City Council, as the legislative and chief policymaking body of the city, functions in three basic capacities. First, in the enactment of local laws, policies, and regulations. Second, in overseeing the delivery of government services and performance by city agencies and departments. And third, as representatives of their various wards and communities within those wards. This slide simply restates what other slides have already shown in terms of proposed budget, staffing, and the difference between current fiscal year and next year's proposed budget. There are no enhancements or supplemental requests associated with this program. That completes my review of the mayor's proposed budget for City Council. I'm happy to stand for questions or proceed to reviewing the proposed budget for City Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Carl. Are there any questions for Mr. Carl on this item? Councilmember Gordon.
Were there any things that you really wanted to see in the mayor's budget and would advocate for that didn't show up there?
There's nothing that is before us to talk about in terms of what's been recommended for City Council. There were no changes to the City Council's proposed budget.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So I'll proceed to the Office of City Clerk. Details for this budget can be found in the book on pages F15 to F22. This slide provides a table of organization for the Office of City Clerk. As you know, the City Clerk serves in three primary capacities. First, as the city's chief elections official. Second, as clerk of the City Council. And third, as custodian of enterprise information assets and responsible authority under state law. This slide shows that two of those functions are funded through the Office of City Clerk as a program. Beginning in 2018, it's proposed to separate the Elections and Voter Services Division as a separate programmatic budget, and I'll cover that in a moment. This slide provides a high-level analysis of the proposed budget for 2018. In total, the mayor has recommended a funding level of approximately $5 million. That's a small increase over the current fiscal year's budget of approximately $4.9 million. You'll note the mayor has proposed a few change items equaling $145,000. Most of these program enhancements are for the clerk's records and information management division tied to enterprise data governance initiatives. The Legislative Support and Administration Division serves as a secretariat of the City Council and its standing policy committees, and it provides similar services for the Independent Audit and Independent Executive Committees, as well as the Minneapolis Charter Commission. This division is responsible for publishing, preserving, and providing access to the City Charter, the Code of Ordinances, and other official legislative records. This division also handles the day-to-day operations of the department and delivers a variety of delegated services under state and local policies. This slide shows that the Legislative Division is proposed to be funded at about $2.9 million. That's a slight decrease from the current fiscal year. This reflects a permanent funding shift the mayor has proposed to offset shortfalls in the Elections and Voter Services Division. The mayor's budget proposes to take $200,000 in base budget from the Legislative Division and transfer that permanently to the base budget for the Elections Division. Staff is proposed to remain constant with a total of 15 full-time positions. Mayor Hodges has proposed a one-time funding increase of $25,000 to this program to cover costs related to transition and other matters following the 2017 municipal election. The Records and Information Management Division provides enterprise controls with respect to the creation, use, storage, and disposal of information assets by the city government. It ensures compliance with applicable laws related to the accessibility of government data, and it includes a production unit that provides production, delivery, and disposal services for all city agencies and departments. This slide shows that the Records Division is proposed to be funded at just over $2 million. That's a slight increase from the current fiscal year. This reflects some enhancements and change items proposed by the mayor for the 2018 budget, totaling approximately $120,000. Of that total, about $50,000 is proposed as one-time funding, and $70,000 is proposed as ongoing funding for operations. The division remains constant with a total of 11 full-time positions. The first change item is for a centralized data practices request system that totals $10,000 in ongoing funding. The goal of this project is to acquire and deploy a solution to support internal workflow, data review, and release of public data through the Records Division, consistent with statutory duties assigned to the clerk as responsible authority for the City of Minneapolis under the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act. This second change item is for a centralized data review and redaction system, which complements the previous item I discussed. Total ongoing funding is proposed at $60,000. The goal of this project is to acquire and deploy a solution to support internal review, vetting, and redaction work that's associated with screening data to ensure appropriate privacy protections, as well as the protection of confidential and not public data from inappropriate release. This project is a partnership between the Clerk's Office and the Office of City Attorney. The third change item proposed by the mayor is one-time funding totaling $50,000 to support the initial startup for a centralized enterprise imaging and scanning operation. This new service would support all city agencies and departments in the conversion of printed data into digital formatting, which would reduce reliance on paper records, streamline internal operations, and enable greater access and sharing of data both internally and with the public. That completes my review of the proposed budget for the city clerk. I'm happy to respond to questions or proceed with a review of elections and voter services.
Mr. Carl, I do have a couple of questions regarding the change items, in particular the ongoing. Are those to reflect technology? Is it a contract, or how would it be an ongoing? Is it additional personnel? Just
Mr. Chair, this is for the acquisition of new systems, technology that would support both a centralization of data practice processing, handling, and release of data, as well as, in combination with the city attorney's office, systems that would allow us to review and redact not public data from data that is public.
okay. Is there a piece of equipment with that?
There is not equipment associated with those projects.
Okay. And do you happen to know, I know we haven't, it's not the city attorney's presentation yet, that's a little bit later today, but I was just wondering, do you know if there's a portion of that budget, you said it's in coordination with the city attorney's office, is that also represented in their budget request?
Mr. Chair, there is not funding, to my knowledge, in the city attorney's office separate from what's provided in the clerk's office. We do work in tandem with the city attorney's office in that work, and so they would have access to the system for their purposes related to legal processing and would work with us in terms of redaction.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carl, I must say before we move too further, and I know we have a couple of questions. This reflects an amazing amount of work, not just showing up in a 2018 budget request, but the city clerk's office has done a tremendous job, especially in the area of records information over the past several years as we're evolving into this. So I really, really appreciate the work of you, your staff, and the growing commitment to being responsive to the public's needs and data practices especially. And this budget, I hope, reflects something that'll help us continue to be stronger.
Thank
So
you,
thank you
Mr.
very
Chair. I'll
much.
pass that along to the staff.
Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would echo that. I have a lot of constituents, though, who I think are kind of open data enthusiasts. And I'm getting questions a lot about how long it's taking to get responses to data requests. And I just wondered if we're tracking that, if we'll be able to show, before and after some of these investments, and how we prioritize responding to different data requests. And we could follow up too, just so I have better preparation to answer those questions.
Mr. Chair, Council Member Bender, actually, we have been internally, I shouldn't say we, Kristen Rummelhoff, the assistant clerk who leads the Records and Information Management Division, is brilliant, as all of you know, and is both a lawyer by training and a technology enthusiast by, I would say, hobby. And he has been building on his own using existing tools, data visualizations and tracking tools that will allow us currently to show how many requests we're processing, the average time it takes to close a request, broken down by type of request, department, et cetera. And it's one of those things that once we are in a better position to report that data, we would appreciate the opportunity to come to council and share that information. We appreciate and hear frequently from many constituents, including yours, who are these data enthusiasts who we work with frequently. So
I appreciate that. And I think even over these last 4 years, I think we've seen more interest in this. And so I appreciate echoing the chair's comments about how we've been able to transition and kind of ramp up and be responsive to this new interest. I think there's a lot of benefit to the city when we're able to provide data publicly. We get more input on it. We have informed constituents. So I just want to echo the appreciation for all the work that's gone into this transition, which has been pretty quick in the amount and interest level in data requests.
thank you. And I would be remiss if I didn't again point out that Mr. Rummelhoff, Kristen Rummelhoff, the assistant clerk, and his team have been at the lead of that and have done amazing work, as you have said.
Thank you. Councilmember Gordon, did you have?
I did. So
Sure.
I noticed a little reduction in the legislative support and administration between 2017 and 2018. I'm wondering what we're losing there. And I'm also wondering if there are any things that you wish were in the mayor's recommended budget that you think we need, especially in terms of supporting the council, our committees, our need to do research, and those kinds of things. because I know that we get some of probably the best work out of the clerk's office, out of anywhere in the city, and there's a real sense that you are the arm of the council and very supportive of it, and so I want to make sure that you have the resources you need so we can do the job that we want to do.
Mr. Chair, to Councilmember Gordon's comments, thank you. I appreciate the compliments. They are very much appreciated both by me and the staff who work with me in support of the council. The $200,000 transfer in the mayor's budget from the legislative division to the elections division, I believe, is an attempt to shore up a budget which, as you're probably aware, historically has been underfunded. And this was an attempt to right-size that elections budget within some broader policy parameters set for the entire enterprise. So in considering the budget allocations to serve the entire city, this was an intra-departmental transfer of funds to cover a program which has a higher visibility and perhaps a more impactful, I should say just more impact to the public in terms of voting, being the gateway to starting government. When I get into the elections budget in a little bit more detail, you'll see that there are some additional enhancements to that one-time, or not one-time, but that ongoing transfer from one division to the next, which I think reflects a deliberate attempt by the mayor in proposing a budget to provide a more realistic and reasonable budget for elections in terms of serving the voters in the biggest city in the votingest state of the union. So I hope that answers your question. If not, Mr. Intermill may be able to provide a little bit more depth or detail on that. I certainly am not privy to all of the mayor's decisions that go into her proposed budget, but this one certainly reflects some concerns raised over many years by me as the chief elections official for the city that funding in that specific program has been less than desirable for us.
So if it had remained in the legislative support area, would we have been able to hire more staff?
The $200,000 that is being proposed is not tied to positions, Councilmember Gordon, and so it was not necessarily an opportunity to hire more staff. Certainly, any reduction in any budget across the city enterprise is a choice and means that there is less that we are able to do in one division in order to do more in another. And it is, of course, a balancing act for the budget office to help departments understand where they need to prioritize. But again, in representing all three of those divisions, the elections division is certainly, as we're seeing even in this last 2 weeks, certainly impactful to the community and is important to the people who live in Minneapolis, and our voters are, I believe, well served by the things that we are doing as a city, and that is something that requires resources, and so this transfer is reflective of the policy goal to meet those expectations and needs of our voting public.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Mr. Carl, I think you've built in an excellent segue to your next presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move on then to review of the Elections and Voter Services Division. Again, from a budgetary perspective, this is in the Office of City Clerk, and it remains a unit of that, but beginning in 2018, the mayor is proposing to separate this division from a budgetary perspective in order to provide more focus and attention to it. The details for Elections and Voter Services are found within the clerk's office in the budget book under pages F15 to F22. This table shows this slide shows a very simple table of organization. This slide shows that the mayor has proposed to fund the Elections and Voter Services Division at $2.8 million. And that's almost twice the investment from the current fiscal year. In part, this increased funding reflects the four-year election cycle. 2018 is a gubernatorial election year, so we would anticipate higher turnout and thus higher expenditures to support that election. The mayor is proposing a permanent increase to the base budget of $200,000. As we discussed, it's a transfer internally from the legislative division to the elections division on a permanent basis. In addition thereto, the mayor is proposing a one-time funding allocation of $1 million for the 2018 gubernatorial election, and that again is in addition to that enhanced base budget. The Elections and Voter Services Division is focused on ensuring that the city is prepared to administer an election whenever required, and that voters are election ready and able to participate in free, fair, and equitable election processes. This slide reiterates the previous slides in terms of funding being proposed for 2018, and it also shows the headcount remains constant at 6 full-time positions. This slide provides a narrative about the mayor's proposal to increase by $200,000 the base budget for the Elections Division on an ongoing basis. This slide provides a narrative about the mayor's proposal to provide one-time funding for the 2018 gubernatorial election in the amount of $1 million. That one-time allocation is, again, in addition to an enhanced base budget for the Elections Division. It almost doubles the total budget in comparison to the current fiscal year. With that, Mr. Chair, I've concluded my review of the City Council, the City Clerk, and the Elections and Voter Services Division. I'm happy to stand for any final questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carl. Are there any questions for Mr. Carl on the Elections Division? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. Carl.
Thank you.
So we're just being able to run a little bit ahead of schedule. So, Commissioner, if you'd like to, any transition time you need, and whenever
Great.
you're ready, please feel free to begin.
I appreciate the extra time so we can have some questions and answers. While we're getting our slide. Okay. I'll just start with a little preamble. I am the presentation or the Health Department's budget book pages are 133 through 140. I will be using an abbreviated deck of slides, but I will make reference to what number my slides are in the deck that you have so that you can follow along.
Just to be clear, Ms. Musicant, are all of the both decks are up on the website for?
Just the one, it was
Sure.
Finance's advice that we just
Good.
give you the longer one.
Okay.
And so that's why I'll be telling you what pages.
Okay. Thank you
correspond.
very much.
So, good morning. I'm Gretchen Musicant, the Commissioner of Health. I just want to say that the Health Department is a nationally accredited local health department, which has met high standards to be one of 200 or so such agencies nationwide. So we're in a very small group of accredited local health departments. We have been recognized at the state and national level for our creative regulatory work, our leadership on fighting pollution, our business-friendly approaches, our efforts to work with community members to improve health and prevent chronic diseases, and our leadership in addressing violence as a public health issue, to name a few. We are also proficient and accomplished grant writers and are creative in forging funding opportunities and partnerships. An important foundation of our service to the city and the people who live here is the ongoing financial support of the city. And so thank you for this opportunity to present the mayor's recommended 2018 budget for the health department to you today. And now we're ready. Perfect timing. So pages 3 through 6, which I believe correspond to your pages 3 through 6, are an overview of the 2017 adopted budget, the recommended 2018 budget, which includes the mayor's recommendations, but also a separate item or line for those recommended change items or new dollars. And so if we look at page 6, you'll see that the bottom line is a department budget between general fund and non-general fund of around $22 million, with a little less than 50% being general fund support. And within that general fund support, the new recommendations being $816,840. So I'm going to focus on the change recommendations. The first of which is in the area of youth development, and this is found on your page 18. This relates to sexual health and STI prevention, sexually transmitted infections prevention. The recommendation is for $100,000 of ongoing funding with no FTE. Over the past 5 years, Minneapolis has experienced a steady increase in STI infection rates, coupled with decline in resources, especially for prevention activities. The city of Minneapolis has the highest incident rate for chlamydia and gonorrhea compared to any other city in Minnesota. Despite our fiscal challenges, we have intensified our efforts in the Minneapolis Public Schools through our school-based clinics. resulting in increased testing and services. And you can see on page 15, there's a graph that shows the increase in tests. However, our school-based clinics have a limited reach. They are in the Minneapolis Public Schools, and so they're for students who are there. Resources to implement additional strategies are needed that are prevention-focused, community-based, and targeted to populations of color who disproportionately represent the majority of STI cases identified. This funding will be used to implement non-clinical approaches informed by the feedback and recommendations we received from youth who participated in a 2015 study on this issue, which was reported to our HECE committee. The Health Department has previous success in implementing targeted outreach strategies such as these. Between 2004 and 2009, we had a federal grant, and we were able to have a positive impact on the city's chlamydia cases during that time. The next recommendation is on your page 19, having to do with sex trafficking. In 2017, $75,000 was allocated to begin working on creating innovative strategies to address sex trafficking and exploitation in the city of Minneapolis, with specific emphasis on high incidence areas in Ward 9. $50,000 of that 75 is ongoing, so this request from the mayor is for an additional $25,000 in one-time funding. Because it was a new program in 17, by the time we had issued contracts and done RFPs, it really gave the contractees only about 9 months to plan and implement their activities. This additional year of funding will allow us to have those agencies have 2 full years of service, and will be able to better evaluate their impact. The next area of recommendation from the mayor is $40,000 in one-time funding with no FTEs in support of the Children's Savings Account. This is found on your page 20. Last year, the mayor and the council agreed to allocate $15,000 to begin to explore this idea of Children's Savings Account. This $40,000 will continue that exploration and outreach to other partners. Children's savings accounts are long-term accounts established for children and youth and are allowed to grow until children reach adulthood. The YCB will use these funds to pursue additional foundation support for the development and implementation of this program. Research on these programs elsewhere have accomplished such outcomes as increased college expectations through fostering a college-bound identity, improving college attendance, increasing college completion, reducing student loan debt, and increasing families' financial capability by giving accounts that are appropriate, accessible, affordable, and secure. Next recommendation has to do with...
Excuse me.
Yes.
Thank you, Council Vice President. I saw that. Councilmember Johnson has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, on the Child Savings Account program, how much or how many children will this serve? How much is it per child? And what are the other programs similar to this that are already being provided in the city, whether it's with nonprofits or with existing banks?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, this is continuing to explore the answers to those questions. This money will not be used to actually start accounts. It will be used to start the undergirding system, to figure out will there be multiple banks that maybe might participate in a collaborative? How could this program be fit with other programs, say from the county or other interested parties that might wish to contribute to accounts? So this is not establishing the accounts, but creating the infrastructure for that.
And do such programs already exist that help children with savings accounts today in our state, in the Twin Cities, in Minneapolis?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, I do not know the answer to that.
When will we know the answers around this? Because this, we've put in 15,000 before, right? And this is 40,000, so 55,000. Will that give us all the answers? Do we expect we're going to have to put in additional money to try to get at answers?
Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if you can help me out. Does the Youth Coordinating Board have time before you to make a presentation as well?
It does, actually. The Youth Coordinating Board is the one that's tasked with this, but it appears under the Health Department budget. But there is an opportunity to have a Youth Coordinating Board budget presentation, and they'll be able to address some of that. But and I think to answer your question, it's being passed through with consultant right now to continue the work. They've attended several national conferences, and on this topic, I know that there's been several experts brought in from other communities who do it, including San Francisco. And I think that's building on that work. I think that they're in a position to make a recommendation with the conclusion of this work. So yes, I think they'll be answering the questions with this resources and identifying what the cost would be for an adoption of a children's savings account program, should that go forward.
Gotcha. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But I think that we'll have more in-depth answers, as Commissioner suggests, in the Youth Coordinating Board, because it's not actually housed in the Health Department.
Thank you. On to the next proposal, which is called Next Step, and that's on your page 24. The mayor is recommending $25,000 in one-time funding for replication of this hospital-based violence intervention program, which is now up and running at HCMC, to replicate it at North Memorial. In 2016, we started the Next Step program at HCMC. It serves youth and young adults who've been treated for gunshot and stab wounds in the hospital, helps the participants heal from trauma, avoid violent re-injury, and provides alternatives to negative behavior, lifestyle, and retaliation, and makes the city safer. Since launching in July of 16, about 98 participants have received services that are beyond just a bedside interaction. Many of those are engaged in long-term community-based services. Our current staffing, the hospital's current staffing level, which is augmented by a grant from the state, does not allow for 24/7 coverage, and so there were at least 51 additional eligible participants in that same time period that were not served by Next Step. During that same time, North Memorial served 372 victims of violent injury. So you can see that they have similar numbers to HCMC. And they had no access to a resource like Next Step. So we have been providing, in 2017, we've been providing technical assistance to North Memorial. They have established a violence prevention steering committee that includes their president and leadership from their emergency department, trauma, security, injury prevention, case management, pastoral care. And that kind of buy-in is essential. But we have learned from our experience with HCMC. It took us quite a while to get HCMC to adopt this, and now they are wholeheartedly supporting it. But we know that complementing technical assistance with some seed money is really an important step. And so that's what this $25,000 is for. In terms of the outcomes, to date, only 3 of our 98 participants from HCMC have returned to HCMC with a violent injury, and so we feel that that is a sign of some success, since many of these young people are injured repeatedly. The next recommendation is
Excuse me,
related to...
Councilmember
Yes.
Bender had a question.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very interested in this program because, as you indicated, a lot of the violent crime that we're seeing increased has to do with youth who are retaliating. And it seems that we're having anecdotally very compelling success in getting young people not only to reduce the number of violent crimes that are being committed, but getting into GED programs and finding jobs and becoming better parental partners. And so I know we put some money in the budget last year to help start the program, to expand it. And my understanding is that between the 2 hospitals, North Memorial actually has a higher rate of violent crime victims. And so I think there's like a lot of reasons to want to expand the program there. Could you tell us the funding amount that would really take to get that program up and running, what other potential funding sources there are if the city can find a higher match, and what that would really look like to have a robust program at both HDMC and North Memorial?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender. Currently, because of the funding we have through the State Office of Justice programs, we have a budget of $140,000 per year at HCMC. And as I mentioned in my comments, that is not enough to staff 24/7. It supports 3 staff at 24 hours per week. And so in talking with staff who are, and so that 140,000 is paired with some additional dollars right now. And so we're spending about $190,000 at HCMC, or HCMC is spending that money. It's not our staff. And so, I'm sorry, so that, I'm mixing my numbers up again, so here, or a little bit. So that 190,000, which we currently have, allows for 3 staff at 35 hours per week. We will just have that funding through the end of this year, when we will be down to 140,000, which is what we get from the State Office of Justice program. So that will cut us back from 35 hours to 24 hours a week. So if, as you pointed out, North Memorial has similar or greater number of people who are victims that we might serve, one can imagine that we would need to at least double that amount. The State Office of Justice programs does have interest in the work that's going on in Minneapolis. That may be a source for us for some additional funding when North Memorial is ready to move forward. So, page 25, group violence intervention. This is a fairly complex program to fully describe to you as part of a brief budget presentation, but it is a very successful program. And the results that we've had to date have far exceeded our expectations based on what's happened in other cities. So it's clearly a program that is at the right time and the right place in Minneapolis. The mayor's recommendation is for $150,000 of additional ongoing funding and 1.5 FTE positions. And let me just step back and tell you a little bit about the 2017 funding and how that relates to this recommendation in 18. So in 2017, you approved $140,000 in ongoing funding for group violence intervention, but did not include any FTEs. The 1.5 FTEs that the mayor is recommending will be fundable out of that $140,000 that is ongoing. So it's not, those FTEs do not require additional dollars, just the approval of the FTEs. Those FTEs would be 1 for outreach and community engagement, and then 0.5 for administrative support. Secondly, in 2017, you also approved one-time funding of $150,000 to get the GVI program started. The request of ongoing funding in 2018 will make that original $150,000 an ongoing allocation. This will allow the health department to maintain our case management and outreach activities that are currently being funded through the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, a federal grant that will end in 2018. So the GVI model, in the GVI model, law enforcement uses data to identify criminal patterns in order to narrow their focus on the most violent offenders. And so using that group of most violent offenders, call-ins are created. So meetings are created to call together these young people and to have dialogue with them. And that includes the mayor, the county attorney, the U.S. attorney, the police chief, people from the community who are expressing a moral exhaustion from violence, and people from North Point, which is our contracted community services agency, talking about the help that we will offer young people if they turn to a different, if they use their influence for positive rather than negative. And it is paired with messages from the police that if there is violence, that those involved directly in the violence will not be the only ones pursued, but anyone in their group. So therefore, it's called group violence intervention. So we've had 2 successful call-ins since we started, and we now have between 35 and 40 active gang members or documented gang members who are actively involved in seeking help to lead a different kind of lifestyle. Based on the success of other cities, we had planned for 25 such folks in the first year, and we have nearly 40 and are only 2/3 of the way through the year. So it is a very successful strategy here in Minneapolis. It has also resulted in police action. Since the launching of the program in May, police efforts have resulted in 65 arrests and repossession of 20 handguns. So the ongoing funding will allow us to provide consistent community engagement in order to get widespread support and buy-in from residents and key stakeholders with the end goal of reducing the number of shootings and homicides occurring in our city.
Yes, Councilmember Bender?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to note that I had the opportunity to get a briefing about this program from the staff who are leading it, and I would encourage anyone with questions to do so. One of the things that is very compelling about this was the number you mentioned about the guns that were getting off the street through this program. My understanding, and I don't remember the exact percentages, but that we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of guns that we're getting off the street. And the police department is crediting this program for getting guns off of our street. And so another thing I just want to note is that, talking with both our former and current police chief and other folks in the police department, I also know how much this is interacting with law enforcement. So it's a very collaborative program, and I think, again, a very complementary program to our law enforcement investments to give, actually a tiny fraction of the amount of funding that we give to that to this violence prevention work that is having very compelling results in our community for a very small amount of money, relatively speaking. So just a couple of highlights I wanted to note. I obviously very passionate about these particular programs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Councilmember Bender. I have had a chance to attend both of the 2 call-ins, and I'd say they are very powerful events, and to see this program in work, in action.
Council Vice President?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I was just going to suggest, since this seems like a program where you're saying that there's kind of more to it than this short thing that you read, I just wonder if you could send around to us a more fulsome explanation of why you think it's exceeded your expectations, some of the things that you hope to continue to kind of augment. I think that would be helpful. I am not positive if I'm able to make time to kind of meet on this personally on this program, but it doesn't mean I'm not interested and want to make sure I'm fully understanding the investment that has been made and why this additional investment is good use of our dollars. And it seems like you have a story you want to tell a little bit more of, and I want to make sure you have an opportunity to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Glidden. We will put something together for all of you.
I think that's a tremendous suggestion. This gives us an opportunity through these budget hearings to actually use it as a kind of a mini results, checking in on the investment that's made and what we're going to be able to continue to invest in and strengthen programs, especially programs like this, which treat violence as a health issue. That's at the core of the work that we're doing. And we really appreciate that, of course, and the impact it's making. But it's really that preventative kind of upstream work that we really need to highlight and make sure we're making those appropriate investments to get to save money on the back end, as well as all of the destruction in people's lives through gun violence. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next recommended change item is on page 38. It has to do with preparing for the Super Bowl. We expect that we will have in excess of $40,000 in overtime expenses in our food, lodging, and pools work. These funds are expenses that are reimbursable by the Super Bowl committee, so it's just flowing through the city. It is only the overtime that's associated with NFL-sanctioned events requiring evening and weekend inspections for prep and service. It does not include other events that will occur because of the Super Bowl throughout the city, but we do appreciate the support for that overtime.
Ms. Muscat, just one quick question. The overtime is going to be reimbursed by the local organizing committee for the NFL, but these will also include inspections and inspection collections. Is that correct or not? Safety inspections, health inspections.
Mr. Chair, these overtime expenses will be for those types of purposes.
Gotcha.
But there will be many other events that happen that are not NFL sanctioned that we will also be doing more work for
Right.
of that type.
Okay, thank you.
Second request related to food, lodging, and pools is on page 39. As you may have heard, in 2016, the city rolled out the Enterprise Land Management System, ELMS, that replaced really a lot of aging programs that we had to keep track of our work. This request is for one-time funding of $60,000 to help us in coordinating the ELMS configuration and other enhancements that we hope to get out of ELMS. Currently, our inspectors are diverted from their field work in order to perform these functions, and so this would backfill those efforts, assuming that the 2018 will be a really great year for ELMS, and we will feel like we're over the hump and on to positive implementation. The next recommendation is related to environmental services and our pollution reduction and green business program found on page 44. And so the recommendation is that $272,000 in ongoing pollution reduction and legacy pollution efforts be funded, no FTEs. This will continue funding that was previously one-time funding for the past couple years. And one source of funding for this kind of work is the pollution control annual registration fees, which were modified in 2016 to really increase fees paid by the garbage burner, XL, and NRG, and added some fees to fuel tanks and wells. And so the work of this green business and pollution reduction program is also going to be focused on addressing energy use as well as pollution. And there's a graphic on page 47 that really shows you the phenomenal impact of these programs so far. We have worked with 57 businesses and have been able to decrease the pollution, the annual pollution, by 90,000 pounds, which is, I can't quite imagine what that looks like, but it's a really big number, and I'm so proud of that work. With this ongoing support, we will be able to eliminate an estimated 15 tons of pollution, 5,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions, which is the equivalent of an additional 1,000 cars being taken off the road each year additively.
Councilmember Gordon had a question.
Thank you. And I don't know if this is for Ms. Musicant or maybe the budget director, but it looks like it says in here that in 2018, we're expecting to see an increase from the pollution control annual registration fees of $340,000. And I'm wondering where that $340,000 goes, and is it accounted for somewhere in the general fund, and is it used let's go to police force, or what happens to that? And if we are we expecting it, and is that the number we're actually expecting?
Mr. Indermill, can you help?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, council member. The fees are indeed collected to the general fund, just like most of the fees that we collect. And I think that the materials show a $340,000 increase over 2016, not $340,000 over 2017.
Good point.
And yes, they have been accounted for in the budget system, so we are planning on those as general fund revenues, just like all others.
Okay. Are there any restrictions in terms of fees? Sometimes we say, whoa, the fees are supposed to be used just to cover what we're doing, but I think PCAR has more flexibility. Or Does anybody, is that correct? I'm not sure who's the expert on that.
Certainly. So there is a relationship between the fees that we charge and the work that we perform. But in this case, they aren't tied one-to-one like some, for instance, our regulatory services, some of the activities that they perform, those fees are collected directly to a special revenue fund. And so there's more of a direct relationship, whereas here, and as with most of our fees, it's there's that general fund relationship, so more flexibility.
And of course, certainly with any operation in the city, there's overhead costs that have to do with the general city's enterprise that we have to cover. I understand that, but it's also kind of worth noting that what a mighty engine the health department can be when it's actually collecting revenue to support the other departments in this way or whatever we're doing, and maybe we can keep that in mind. I know this has been an incredibly popular program, the Green Business Program, and there are lots of people hoping that we could increase it and add to it. And what we're really doing with the 272 is stabilizing it at a certain level, which is good, better than zeroing it out, but just wanted to highlight that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, and I just wanted to say that the ongoing nature of the recommendation is really important for us to plan for future activities. The next and second to the last, no, third to the last, recommendation is found on page 45. This is related to multifamily residential energy benchmarking. And so the recommendation is $74,000 in ongoing funding, but no FTE, to add a multifamily residential energy benchmarking segment to the city's energy benchmarking program. To do that additional work, we would need council action to step into that realm. The health department currently manages operations for the commercial energy benchmarking with great success. The program currently runs on 1.2 FTEs. And adding residential will add another 360 buildings to interact with, essentially doubling the size of the current program in terms of number of buildings. Our commercial energy benchmarking program is a national leader in compliance and data accuracy, and the program helps building owners through scorecards and informs the public and general market through annual reports, and that's part of the impact, is to make this information known to those who are making choices about which buildings to use. As a city, it also helps us understand the sectors with the largest carbon footprint, and also will help us to drive further change.
Councilmember Gordon had a question.
I guess I had a question about the $74,000 without any staff, and if we're adding 360 buildings potentially, and I'm excited about going into residential multifamily benchmarking. I think that we're going to do it. Who's going to do the work, and why isn't the $74,000 going to support staff that we need?
In our request to the mayor, we had asked for a half-time position. We think that we can, there's some efficiency to be had now that we have the commercial benchmarking done, so we don't need to like double the staff. I would have to look to the mayor's office to help us understand why they did not put that in here.
Okay, maybe it was sort of an oversight or something.
Council Vice
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. I will look forward to just hearing a little bit more about this. I'm guessing this is a little bit more about preparing for an ordinance, you know, or also being able to kind of augment in the meantime what's already happening on the commercial benchmarking end. Just for folks who maybe aren't following this issue, one of the things we have been waiting on that's important to an ordinance is the capability of the property owners to comply, and that is a little bit dependent on Centerpoint finalizing development of a data aggregation tool. So that is anticipated to be kind of ready in, I think, the third quarter of 2018. And so just as someone who's very interested in these programs, that had been a little bit of the challenge of, you know, preparing an ordinance, but you need to have the mechanism that the property owners can comply. And so that's sort of something we're waiting for and continuing to, I think, be public in our request to Centerpoint, that we want to make sure they're moving that along and so forth. And I know that they know that. The City of St. Paul is doing some initial work on benchmarking both for commercial and residential, but their gas is not provided by Centerpoint. It is provided by Excel, which does have a data aggregation tool ready, so, and usable. So just for folks to kind of understand that environment, I do think this is the natural next step. There are property owners who are anxious to do this. So anyway, continue to look forward to just a little bit more information on how you think that will help us get prepared.
Thank you very much. That was very
Thank
helpful.
you. So the next recommendation from the mayor is on page 56 and has to do with helping the department do some succession planning and right sizing. There will be 2 directors with long tenure who are planning to retire in 2018. And so it is my plan to replace them with a new position, a deputy commissioner, who will oversee enterprise and internal functions with the support of 2 managers, one a manager of research and evaluation, and a second manager of administration, which is the new FTE that the mayor is recommending. This is being recommended within existing department resources, and so we will be working diligently to plan for moving forward with this recommendation. The final mayor's recommendation is a CARS request so that we can purchase and maintain in an ongoing basis some state mandated machines that help us analyze lead content in the paint of homes with children, the homes of children who have been discovered to have elevated lead levels. And that's $30,000. So thank you. That is, those are the change items the mayor's recommending. And if there are any further questions, I'd be happy to try and answer them.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Gordon, is this about the lead? Because I had a question too, but if you handle it, that would be great.
So I've got 2 questions. It's not about the devices.
Okay.
Okay, so, and one of them's not about lead. So I'll start with the one that maybe isn't about lead. So just as, I guess, chair of the health committee and working a lot with the health department, I've been hearing a lot about the growing pressures with more restaurants opening, more food trucks. We actually had a big health scare at an outdoor festival, and we really increased the number of inspections that we're doing at outdoor events and festivals and those kinds of things. And I think the sense is we're going to continue to see pressure in terms of how many restaurants there are. And it's we are kind of get our authority through the state to be handling this. And I'm just wondering if we're going to be able to keep up with inspections to address the kind of growing and diverse restaurant and food industry with this budget, because I didn't see big increases there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Gordon.
I was kind of looking at page 37 too,
Okay.
if anybody wants to.
We are also concerned about our ability to continue to operate as we have and maintain our delegation agreement from the state to do food, lodging, and pools inspections with this particular budget. We had proposed 3 additional staff, and none are recommended. So we are looking at some internal opportunities to take advantage of some salary savings, but we are also looking at cutting back on those activities that are not required by the state, which includes our inspections of, currently we inspect all festivals and events, because we have seen that is a place where there can be food that is not appropriately cared for, and that might become dangerous. So we'll cut that back to just 10% of events will be able to be inspected. We are also currently doing food trucks inspections annually, which is not required. We will do that every 2 years. And we currently inspect the park board pools because there's high use in those pools. We will cut that down to 1 per season. We've been doing that twice per season. So, and also cutting back on some of our support, education, and training of licensed businesses, which we regard as preventive work, but is not required. But in order to meet the required inspection rate, we will need to both look internally at reorganizing some of our funding and also cutting back on services.
Oh, dear. Okay, that seems like foregoing number of inspections. I guess I'm also curious, I know that we get license fees for licensed restaurants and food trucks, and I'm not sure about the outdoor events. Do we have any idea how much revenue we're actually taking in for these and how it compares to the expenses of doing the inspections?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, I'm not prepared to answer that question right now. I'm sure we can get that to you, but I do know that we have had at least an initial meeting with the Finance Department looking at fees, which we really haven't modified the fees related to food, lodging, and pools for a number of years. And so engaging in something starting later this year or early in 18 to look at that fee structure with the potential of making some modifications next year.
It might be interesting to try to marry a different kind of fee structure with getting enough inspectors. I do know that there are concerns, however, about some of the smaller restaurants that use more of a slow cooking, a little bit different. They'd be the hardest ones maybe to carry some of the burdens on those increases in fees, and some of the fast food places that have just this real formula way of operating are easier to inspect, but they might have more of a capacity. So I would love to explore that. I'm concerned about concerned about this. And I have a question that's not about food, lodging, and pools also. So this has to do with concern about lead, and I think page 33, it actually looked at the 2017 adopted budget, and it seems much higher than the 2018 recommended budget, especially the non-general fund, but also there's a decrease in the general fund. Yet I know that we all of a sudden changed the rules on lead. We said now we're concerned about lower levels in blood because it's bad. I know that the state had a I forget parts per million, 5. Was it 10 before, and now it's lowered to 5? So that all of a sudden made lots more people of concern that we want to follow up with and look at their homes and help them. Are we able to keep up with that, even if we're reducing our funds here, or are we just going to fall further behind?
Mr. President, or Mr. Chair, I gave you a little promotion there.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Gordon. Yes, we have received some one-time funding for the past 3 years that funded an FTE that was helping us keep up with this higher caseload because of the lower level at which we're identifying children. So that is not continued, and so it will feel to us as if we have one less staff person, and that it will be one less staff person who's able to respond to the cases. So
we're laying off
40-some cases less per year. We'll be able to, get in and help people change their housing in response to lead that we find there.
So on the slide, it says current FTEs 9. Is that the same as we had last year? Or are you saying that we're losing one inspector?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, 9 is 1 less than we have actively working now in 17.
Okay.
Did I say that correctly? Everybody look backwards.
It's interesting they don't. So I like the way we see the 2017 and the 2018 budget on the slide, and I like that we see full-time equivalents, but we don't see the change. So that's interesting. I'm going to make a little box there and write 17, and we had 10. We have 10 right now, and the plan is to reduce it to 9 next year, even though the number of children with high levels of lead is probably as high as it's ever been. Thank you.
Councilmember Yang, did you have would you like to?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I saw a couple of, or maybe just one expenditure with regards to lead paint, or assessing lead issues, and just wondering how the Northern Metals settlement figures into that, and if it is overlap, or can it be allocated to, let's say, the settlement instead of just into the budget.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, the consent decree is fairly definitive on the kind of activity that is fundable. Most of it has to do with outreach. There is some testing, additional testing. I'll have to look into what kind of flexibility there is there. We have put notice out that we're creating a committee that the council approved to give us guidance from the community on how we work within that consent decree parameter. So the community will also guide us on how that's used, but we'll look into that. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to ask about an item that showed up in the department's proposal but wasn't in the mayor's funded budget, and that's the domestic violence funding. So Councilmember Palmisano and I worked together last year to find one-time funding for this. Could you talk a bit about this program and why it was in the department's proposal?
Well, yes, one-time funding was allocated last year, and we ended up doing a request for proposal process and identifying 3 different organizations that could do the various kinds of work that were outlined in the budget. That process takes a few months, even if you started in December. And so one of the agencies that we contracted with was able to start as early as March. A couple of the others needed to hire some staff, and so they really didn't get started until nearly halfway through the year. So we don't have, we're only now getting our first quarterly reports from them of their activity. And so we had put in a request to continue at least for another year so that we could have a better sense of what is accomplished and what are the needs. But it was just one-time funding.
Thank you. I mean, I think this is why it's not particularly ideal to fund so many things on one time, but this is another piece of the puzzle. I think when you talk to the police department, both the former and current chief, so when you pull the records of some of our highest acting violent offenders, their records go back to the time that they were children and either victims or observers of domestic violence. And so I think that's why Councilmember Palmisano and I worked last year to find the funding to try to invest in this. I understand one of the programs is particularly innovative in the country that's about very young children. So it's a tight budget. Not everything can be funded, but I just wanted to note that that was in the department's proposal and wasn't in the proposed budget. So thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Bender, the deeper we dig into violence, the more we realize that there are many connections between different types of violence, and that all sits in people's brains and affects the choices we have available to make. And so the earlier we can intervene and help young people, the better it's going to be for all of us.
Well, on this topic briefly, because you mentioned that the various programs that we put in that funding with other partners had started at different times of the year. I wondered if there was available resources that would be an eligible use, and maybe Mr. Intermill, if you could help me with that. Would that be one of those eligible uses for a contracted program in the 2017 budget that could be used, continued in 18 as a rollover item?
Mr. Chair, yes. If I'm understanding the question correctly, if the monies have been allocated for a contract and not fully spent, then yes, they could be rolled over to the next year.
I just wanted to clarify that, that could be part of our funding solution, and perhaps we should look into it, of course, through the recommended budget to see if additional resources need to be budgeted, or if we could actually start to count on some of those to be rolled over as an efficient use to fill that funding gap on ongoing programs.
Thank you.
Just wanted to highlight that. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that. I also just wanted to note that there is funding in the city attorney budget for domestic violence work, and this is another one of those collaborative pieces where police department, city attorney, and health are working closely together, as I understand it. I don't want to speak for the departments, but this funding, though, I believe is complementary to the funding that we have separate in the city attorney's budget.
Good. Thank you very much. Are there additional questions for Commissioner Muscat on the budget? Not seeing any. Thank you very much to you and the entire health department for the extraordinary work you do. We're looking forward to continued support in next year's budget. I would like to point out it is 10:45 and the posted time for the city attorney's office presentation is 10:45.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Very impressive timing, I would say, on the part of the council here this morning. While we're waiting for the PowerPoint to load, I wanted to introduce some people from our office who are here. We've had a couple of retirements this year. So our office manager retired, and this is Jessica Casper, to my right, who has taken her place and is just doing an amazing job. And then Tim Scarda retired last Friday, 36 years with the city attorney's office and our litigation manager, and just an incredibly talented lawyer and wonderful human being. But we're in good hands. Tracy Fussy is our new litigation manager.
Welcome, welcome. Good job. I don't know. I think you may need 2 or 3 people to replace Mr. Scarda, but I think Ms. Fussy is a great start. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, with the applause, I think I'll sit down.
Mic drop.
And Lynn White is here, who's my amazing admin helper, and Eric Nilsson and Mary Ellen Hang, who are our civil and criminal deputies, and are just doing amazing work in their own right. So we're really lucky to have such a talented office for the residents of the city of Minneapolis, and for me, most importantly. So ours is a relatively simple, in terms of budget changes. There's not a lot of changes. With the programs, we have divided our office into 4 programs: the community attorney program, where we have a prosecutor housed in each of the 5 precincts. We have a lot of our innovative approaches to dealing with nuisance and kind of lower level crimes housed in that program, for including the Downtown 100, Focus 1824, etc. And with our programs, we continue to achieve just amazing results by trying to keep people out of the workhouse, if at all possible, and assigned, for the people who are really chronic offenders, assigned to active probation supervision, and really connecting them with services to deal with their underlying issues. And this is a chart I love from our Downtown 100 program. It's just an example. We continue, even though they're only we have hands on them for only a year, the recidivism continues to reduce for years afterward. So we really are achieving the long-term results that we set out to accomplish. Criminal prosecution, which handles 16,000 cases a year, does the lion's share of our work. That's the people officed in the city attorney's office here in our criminal division. Civil litigation, also a busy practice. And we continue to have amazing results in court. We just won a federal jury trial case just last week. The jury was out deliberating, I think, maybe not quite 2 hours, but anyway, we are just lucky to have them here in the office. And then client services, that does all the other civil legal work. And we've got people with employee benefits expertise, Susan Trammell, to really real estate lawyers who I have seen up against in negotiations with the best real estate lawyers in the state of Minnesota, and I would pick our people over them. So we really have quite a wide range of expertise. in our office, and we're lucky to have them. This is just a summary of the change items in our budget. The biggest item deals with this pre-filing charging team, and this is something that we've gotten 2-year funding for previously. We hired 2 prosecutors to backfill and then selected some experienced prosecutors in our office to do charging in conjunction with an IT project that took approximately a year. As you may know, most of our cases, by far a vast majority of the cases in our criminal division, are cases that are charged directly by police officers through citation. And with this charging team and this IT project, a holding tank was created whereby these electronic citations go to this virtual holding tank. Our charging team lawyers review them, decide whether they are good cases or not, cases that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt. If they are not, then they are dismissed before anything is ever filed in the court to avoid the collateral consequences of a charge showing up later just to be dismissed by us. Individualized feedback is given to police officers. If we're seeing a repeat problem, we raise that up the chain, and we do training for police officers to try to fix any confusion or issues that we see. And this charging team also allows us the opportunity to offer pre-charge diversion. So for eligible defendants, they're offered the opportunity for diversion before anything's filed with the court. If they accept and complete successfully, there is no record created. We do keep information so we know how many times this has been offered, so people can't just continue to violate the law and be sent repeatedly for pre-charge diversion. And it's allowed us to increase the speed in which we're able to review and charge cases, which helps for all sorts of things. Not only helps us to have better cases, but there's more accountability rather than waiting months for it. So there's been over a 2/3 decrease in the amount of time to review and charge cases. And then another project that the council funded a couple of years ago was a diversion coordinator position. So with the diversion coordinator position and this and the charging team, we've been able to increase the number of individuals referred to our diversion programs, and we're on tap this year to hit 1,000 individuals. And our diversion coordinator is doing more proactive outreach to individuals, and we're also analyzing results in terms of demographics, race, et cetera, to make sure that they're effective and equitable, and we're finding out how to make them more effective.
I have a question on this.
Please, Councilmember Glidden, go ahead.
Thank you. This was just back on the following slide that you're on right now. And I just want to say in general, I know that there has been a lot of careful work by you and your team to develop these programs. And so I really appreciate that there's been a good, thoughtful approach on how to do it. And we're continuing to look at how to make appropriate investments in this kind of work. I'll just say it'd be helpful, maybe not for now, but for follow-up, if I don't know if there's any more context you can give us to like what these numbers mean. So I appreciate we're kind of looking at numbers on a page, but I don't really understand in context what that means. Is it, how do we know if those are good numbers or not? What is it, how does that sit in terms of the whole scope of those charged? You know, do we have enough resource to identify an appropriate number to go to diversion programs? Is this really just resource-based? How many individuals are able to participate in diversion programs, or is this just the right number that is appropriate for those programs by whatever criteria you're setting? So anyway, just some follow-up that helps us understand understand the impact more in a more contextual way, because I don't know that I'm fully understanding, the importance and scope of your work through these numbers right here. I know that the city attorney's office serves a very large number of individuals. You do a lot of work. That's why I just make this point. I'd like to understand it in a little bit more context.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea, and we're doing some of that background work now. Absolutely. The next change item is to get some additional funding for what we've called the Pathways Program. This was started about a year ago, although it didn't become active until mid-year this year, May of this year. We issued an RFP. This is a program focused on individuals charged with carrying a pistol without a permit. They are largely young males, which I'm sure is no surprise to anyone, 18 to 25, 26 years old. High rate of recidivism based on what we were doing with the standard 30 days in the workhouse type of sentence. So we were trying to find a better and more effective approach. And Urban Ventures provided the best response to the request for proposal. They have established a really interesting kind of intense programming period with twice a month follow-up for a year after. We think it's a good program and worth continuing. We're working with the Public Defender's Office on getting feedback on how we can increase numbers of referrals and what concerns they've got in terms of recommending this as an alternative for their clients. Particularly now with gun crime on everybody's mind, this is a good opportunity to see if we can help these young people go down a different path and have a better life. Generally, this is their first adult offense. Before we ask for permanent funding, we want to see what works and really evaluate what works and tweak and change so that it is effective. We have started, and I really need to give credit to Councilmember Cano for helping facilitate this and push us to do this work. But we now offer a pre-charge diversion program for prostituted persons. We work with Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center and the Pride Program of the Family Partnership. And when an individual is arrested for a prostitution-related crime, the advocates meet them and explain what the program is, and they are offered to do this on a pre-charge basis. The Hennepin County District Court, and I give them credit for continuing this, also has the post-charge program, continuing the GIFT program, Gaining Independence for Females in Transition. Both are very much treatment service-oriented approaches for people who are victims of adults who are victims of commercial sexual exploitation. We started this a couple of years ago, and I think Councilmember Bender mentioned some of this work just a minute ago during the Health Department's presentation, but we had noted that the number one call for service through 911 in these violent crime hotspots is coded for domestic violence. I know the PCOC has done some research on that as well. The inspectors for the 4th precinct, the 3rd precinct, and the 5th precinct really reached out to us and said that they would like this program to continue. It pairs family therapists along with police officers to just go out and do follow-up visits. And we are working with the county, the Cultural Wellness Center, and North Point to try to move towards a more proactive service delivery model in dealing with domestic violence. So it's not just handing somebody a card with a whole bunch of phone numbers, but there's more affirmative outreach and warm handoffs. Again, trying to get at the root issues here before they really become criminal cases and have escalated to that point.
Vice President.
Thanks. I just had a follow-up question on this. I know that you have been working with the county, and I think this will now be the third year of the Hotspots program. Am I correct? There was sort of an initial scoping, and
Yep.
then last year was trying to kind of deepen the understanding of the results and the partnerships, as I understand it. And I think it's also important to understand that the inspectors see some benefit from this program. I guess that would be something interesting to kind of quantify. I am curious what the status is with kind of how the county is viewing this work. And I thought at one point a question had been to the county about did they value this in a way that they might put some additional investment in terms of staff or other resources, again, because a lot of the questions end up being not so much about law enforcement response, but about services people may qualify for and are not truly connected with or accessing.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Glidden, I had a series of meetings. Michelle Jacobson, who's head of our domestic violence team, I had a series of meetings with the county a year ago because I had hoped it was a pilot. And I had a year ago said, we're going to get more funding, but hopefully this is the last year we're going to have pilot funding. And we had talked to them about funding a family navigator position. They wound up deciding not to do that, but instead there are programs at North Point that they believe are well funded and would fit our needs, at least for North Minneapolis. And so we're working on connecting those dots. Part of this is paying for police overtime funding, buyback money to allow police officers to go out and meet with these families in a non-enforcement mode as part of trying to build trust and police community relations. So I'm mindful of the title pilot and it not become a permanent quote unquote pilot, and that we make this sustainable, decide what really is achieving results and focusing on those aspects of it. And the reason I included this again was really because of discussions with the police inspectors where their sense was anything like this in these violent crime hotspots, these very particularized hotspots, is helpful. And again, hard to measure. We don't have a measurement for saying yes, and we can say that this has resulted in this decrease or, and at times in this area, if you have an increase in 911 calls, maybe in some ways that's better because people feel like they can reach out for help and they trust the system to help them. And this has been a tough year in the city of Minneapolis with this horrendous death. This woman who was set on fire just recently. We've had 2 domestic related deaths in Minneapolis this year. So it's difficult for all of us as we're trying to figure out how to do a better job and be more effective at our jobs. And so this is just what they did last year. We don't have 2017 numbers yet. And one thing we are going to start working with is the courts have gone through a number of retirements and a lot of new judges coming in. So we kind of gave them a few years, if you will. But things have stabilized on the court, and we are going to push for doing a better job in the courts and really reinstating and improving the domestic violence court there, and talking to the county attorney's office, public defenders, et cetera, on how we can have a better holistic response in this really important area. Then this is another area. The mayor funded this with ongoing funding. There have been domestic violence advocates down in the family violence unit of MPD, where the the investigators are housed. And so advocates have worked hand in hand with the MPD investigators, and we were able to fund this by hook or crook for a number of years through Federal Violence Against Women Act grants. With reductions in the amounts of federal grants and the fact we've been so successful for so many years, we did not receive the most recent one. We may not for a while again because there are places way, way, way behind us in this area. And so this is to really provide some permanent stable funding so that the advocates can continue to work with the domestic violence advocates. And that's really important in terms of being able to effectively investigate these cases, help the victims, and provide support throughout the process. And so this would go into the, I mean, I guess it's through our budget, but it really is for MPD. Really not sexy, but some ongoing funding so that we can have some paid law clerk provisions in our criminal division. During the 2008, 2009, the Great Recession, we were able to eliminate funded paid law clerk positions in the criminal division because law students were really eager to have something on their resumes and were willing to work for free, basically. And in the criminal division, they do get to go into court. They do get to handle, do plea negotiations and traffic cases and the like. But with the economy improving, we do have a need for some paid law clerk positions just so that we can adequately staff our work. We still take advantage. We still have our Dorsey program where we get lawyers from the private law firms who help us with criminal division trials so they can get trial experience and we can get extra bodies to meet demand, as well as fellowship and law school programs for law clerks where they get credit or they're paid through some fellowship, a stipend to work in our office. So we still have some positions, however many we can get that way. Oh, and that's all. Any questions or?
I am not seeing anybody. Just want to give everybody a chance. Oh, excuse me. Council Vice President?
Yeah, I'll just say one thing. I mean, usually in these budget presentations, it's true, we kind of have a lot of focus on the good work of the criminal division. And so I think that's appropriate. There's a little bit more of kind of how you have different programs that can be discussed. And so congratulations on your results there. But I just also want to congratulate the civil division. We've had, as you mentioned, just some landmark cases come through this office and just amazing, amazing results. And so I think you're right. We have, kind of the premier law firm that also, is like one of the only places you get to do constitutional law, all these sort of new questions that you never get a chance to do in a typical law firm. So great work, great team. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well done.
Thank
Thank you very much. Folks, we're ready for the assessor's budget hearing. Allow Mr. Todd any transition time. It's on this side. There you go. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Todd, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of our committee members, Patrick Todd, Minneapolis City Assessor. I'm here to present the 2018 Mayor's recommended budget for the Assessor's Office. This can be found on the budget books, pages F2 to F7. Our first slide is our organizational chart. This is a organizational chart by function of my department. We take a look at this every year to see if we can find ways to be more efficient in how we produce the assessment annually. And in addition to that, we try to find ways to better provide value for the taxpayers as well. Here's a brief summary of the mayor's recommended budget. We do have a technical correction. It slipped through my fingers until yesterday, unfortunately, but in the 2018 recommended budget, it was $6,891,000. That $6 million had included $1,275,000 of CARS funding, which was one-time funding and not ongoing funding. So what I did is I just kept that in there to be consistent, because what's on the web is also that number. And then I put that in gray, and then I added the correct number, the $5,616,000, which is what the general fund recommendation really is. We do have 38 staff in the office, and the increase from 2017 to 2018 is based on the current service level budgeting. It's an increase in education, and it's also an increase in the reclassification of staff. We only have one core program. It's the same program we've had forever. The assessor's office is statutorily mandated to annually determine the classification and market value of all land and improvements in the city of Minneapolis. The office also administers the property tax programs in accordance with state law. So what does this look like? So the programs that we provide are property inspections. We look at 20% of the city each year. So after 5 years, we've physically viewed 100% of the city of Minneapolis. We handle all the tax exemptions as well as the property tax relief programs. And property tax relief programs are the homestead programs, it's the blind and disabled programs, it's the veterans exclusion programs. We do data and record management, taxpayer communication and notification. We do taxpayers appeals and reviews, which is the local boards of appeal. We also do tax court litigation, and then neighborhood and business relations as well. Again, because we only have one program, this is just a restatement of the summary, which is the recommended budget from the mayor is $5,616,000. We feel that our program is in great alignment with the city's goals of one Minneapolis, in addition to the city that works. We support the city's value of providing equity to taxpayers and the residents, because we feel that it's our core value is to have fair and equitable values throughout the city of Minneapolis. Some of the successes that we've had in this last year, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I don't oftentimes get in front of the council. So we are on our 8th consecutive year of meeting the Department of Revenue's sales ratio standards for all property types, residential, commercial, industrial, and apartment. We have seen $11 billion in tax-based growth since 2014, and about $3.4 billion in new construction at the same time, which is tremendous. We also added a few additional features to our online applications, and we're always looking for new and innovative ways to engage the taxpayers. We've also added 2 new videos. If you haven't gone out to our website, please do. We've added 2 new videos out there to help educate taxpayers about the property tax system. In addition to that, the assessor's office, we're very proud to say that we have staff that are engaged in the Black Employees Network. In addition to, we have several staff in the 29% Club. We're also working on a citywide study to identify gaps in the property tax relief programs in underserved communities. And we're working with the Urban Scholars Program. We're testing the impact that we can have if we translate property tax information into a specific language and mail it out to targeted areas. Do we get a better return on participation within property tax program? So we're still working with the Urban Scholar Program to see if we can make inroads in that. Next slide is, this is what $11 billion or a 30% increase in our tax base looks like. While this looks tremendous, and this is actually it is tremendous for the city of Minneapolis, when the real estate market grows this fast in this short period of time, it places a lot of stress on my staff. I think we all know that 2008, the market can change on a dime, and when the market changes on a dime, my staff have to be in tune with that market and have to react just as quickly as the market to be pulling values back or to be adjusting to wherever the market's going. If we don't adjust quickly, if my staff are not in tune with the market, it results in tax court litigation and appeals, and that has a definite negative impact on the city's budget. And so As much as we enjoy to see the property tax, the city grow, we're just also very, very cautious to see when is the market going to change. So, and this is the next slide. It's always fun to see these charts, just because, again, you look at 2010 with $126 million all the way up to $1.024 billion in new construction. I could probably dedicate 1 to almost 2 FTEs just for new construction based on what's going up in Minneapolis over the last few years. Our department's equal employment opportunity goals and action plan. So we have some successes. We definitely have some successes. We're doing more with new hiring practices. We're doing more with recruitment and outreach. I have staff that go out to high school career fairs. They go out to college career fairs. And we're very active in the Community Connections conference as well. 57% of my leadership team is female, which is an outstanding number. We have language-specific property tax information, again, that we're working with for Urban Scholars, with the Urban Scholars program, as well as we're partnering with 311 NCR and Communications on community outreach. Some of the stumbling blocks, we're having a difficult time finding diverse applicants. We can post for positions, and we just don't have the diversity to even choose from, which is a shame. And while we're trying to make inroads through high school career fairs, college career fairs, and community connections, it's probably not enough. We're not going to see us move the dial because we're reaching out, but it's something, but we need to do more. Retaining diverse talent, we are having a real difficult time retaining diverse talent. When we have the exit interviews, oftentimes it's still salary. It can be workload, and it's also safe neighborhoods. Those are the 3 top issues that are raised when my staff are doing their exit interviews. As far as ongoing efforts, I really like to talk about this. This is a new effort. We're working with PPL along with Hennepin County to actually create a career path to hire, train, and pre-license people that really have oftentimes no opportunity to get into the assessor's office because they really don't have any relevant experience, and so they don't even get to the interview process. And so working with PPL, we're going to be working with Dollars from Deed to identify a cohort, to actually get them through all the training, the education. We'll bring them in as interns. We'll get them the years of experience that they need to become certified with the state of Minnesota. And once they become certified, then they can go anywhere. And actually, they'd probably be in the top 5 candidates of any applicant pool with any city in Minneapolis or any city in the state of Minnesota. So we think that that's a really promising program. Getting back to our CARS, our CARS request. This is the second year of our CARS request. This is for a replacement of our CAMA system. The CAMA stands for Computer Aided Mass Appraisal. Our current system was installed in 2000, 2001. So we're in year 16, 17 of a system that has served us well. It's been very reliable, very affordable, and done a good job, but it's not being supported by the current vendor anymore. And at this point in time, their bread and butter is really software for reg services, and it's not for assessors. And so out there right now, they have some incredibly valuable tools that many of the other vendors are providing. So to just summarize here, we're at through the mayor's recommendation, there's a $1.275 million recommendation for the camera replacement system, and we already have $1 million from our previous CARS request already. So this would be the year 2 and the second funding request. And kind of getting back to why is it necessary, we do manage 130,000 parcels in the city of Minneapolis. That's not only for property appraisals, which is really the assessment that we do annually. It's for sales transactions. It's for special assessments. It's for tax exemptions and personal property accounts. And personal property accounts are those parcels that's sitting on Nicollet Island, or it could be billboards or cell towers or unique pieces of real estate that way that do pay property taxes. It does help us assist in administering all the property tax programs by the state of Minnesota. And it is an enterprise solution. I think oftentimes people don't realize how valuable the assessor's data is. You know, it's used by reg services, it's used by public works, it's used by IT, by finance department. It's a source of data that a lot of people, a lot of departments rely on annually. So.
Mr. Todd, real quickly on that CARS request, you said that was the second portion of it. Is that the culmination? Will you be able to implement if this passes through the budget process?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure. We're not through that process. We're doing the 3 demonstrations at the end of this month, the beginning of next month, and then it gets into the contract negotiations. We'll be close. I don't think that we're quite there, but with negotiations, we don't know if we'll be able to get to that point or not. But I think we're very close at this point in time.
Thank you.
Let's see here. So as the next slide again, the current software is no longer supported as far as we're concerned. The core functional software requirements as well as the analytical tools, and there are a significant, I mean, the assessment is valuable, or the reason why we're so successful is really based on the analytical tools that are developed in these software packages. And the new tools that are out there, the new tools that are being developed are really can get us better and more accurate with more parcels than our current software at this point. And last but not least, and this is what I really like, is there's an increase in transparency in the valuation process for property owners and property tax payers. And so currently in our existing system, it was never developed to be able to identify properties that would say, this is based on your value. These are similar properties that would be good comparables to your property. And so we oftentimes, and I would imagine the council members as well, would hear property owner would say, well, I'd like to see the 3 or 4 comparables that were used to develop my assessment or to value my property. And we don't have the ability to identify that. It's really a statistical package. The new systems do that. It's a statistical package, but in the end, it'll also identify 3 or 4 properties similar to the subject property or the property owner's property. It says, well, here's your value, and here's 3 or 4 like yours that would have been used in the analysis of your value. And that level of transparency makes our job easier, and it also makes the council member's job easier as well. And I think that has, it's long overdue. That is a tool that's being used by all the other major metropolitan areas, and we'd like to see us use that as well. So we're getting near to the end here. Last but not least, it's the replacement. There's a lot of inefficiencies in our current system. We see that there could be some definite time savings in the analysis and in the data entry of some of the information, as well as remote access from the field. And last but not least, it'll be the enhancements will also create efficiencies with data transfers and integration with the ELM system, which is something that we're still working on, a really seamless integration with ELMS, as well as Hennepin County and the Department of Revenue. So, and with that, I'll stand for questions.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Todd. I'm not seeing any questions, but I assume you'd like to introduce Ms. Malmquist.
I do apologize. Mr. Chair, committee members, my director, Rebecca Malmquist, who helped me actually quite a bit on this presentation as well. So poor manners on my part.
Well, you're doing a terrific job as of course, our city assessor, but you're also doing a great job for the state in your role as part of the association. So appreciate that. Minneapolis is very proud to play that role, and we appreciate your participation. And just wanted to, one of the ongoing service level things that we don't really talk about in these budget hearings required some conversation a little bit last year about training. I just wondered where you're at with certification of your existing assessors, and what resources are in place to achieve your goal of certification.
Okay. You want? I don't know what the latest statistic is.
Well, I don't have the latest. Chair Quincy and council members, I don't have the latest statistic as far as what percentage of our staff have achieved the accredited Minnesota assessor license that is required. The legislature did change the requirement. It was due in 2019, but they have pushed it out a couple of years to allow other assessors around the state more time. However, we are still suggesting to our staff that if they were aggressively pursuing their accreditation, that we stay on that path. We are meeting with them. We have cohorts that are working on both the reports that they have to develop and exams that they have to take. So thank you very much for the funding. It is being put to good use as far as education and training for them to pursue their required accreditation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think the key emphasis should be on required. This is not something that we're just doing for professional development purposes. This is a certification that's required by state license.
That is correct.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Todd.
Thank you.
Appreciate your report and your budget presentation. and also appreciate you being done 6 minutes soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
The next series of budget hearings will begin on Thursday morning, where we'll be taking up Public Works, and then several after that. So until then, this meeting is adjourned, and we'll look forward to you seeing you on Thursday.